So task 1C is going to be a little bit more review of subordinating conjunctions and using them to find dependent clauses, and then we're going to do a little practice with the writing. So the first thing you need to do is brainstorm, see if you can come up from memory with 10 subordinating conjunctions. You can look at your list if you have to, but we really want to try to start memorizing some. So a good way that I like to memorize some are opposites, after and before. Those two are also prepositions. You might think of the other words that worked as prepositions as, until, and since. Those are 5 that you really should be familiar with. I like to think in pairs, that, and so that. And then we've got a lot of our WH questions. Who, what, where, when, why, and how can all act like subordinating conjunctions. So that's well over 10. If you can memorize those 10, I think you'll be in really good shape, or in those as far as ones that are most common. So we're going to go through, do a little more practice at identifying dependent clauses, recognizing that there could be more than one. You might want to have your list of subordinating conjunctions out from the last paper that we did in 1B. I had you glue all of these papers into your notebook, so make sure that you have them there and you can refer to them. These are going to be study guides for your final test as well. So we're going to go through the same process: highlight the phrases, bracket the infinitives, box the conjunction, underline the dependent clause, and now we're going to add another step. If the clause is at the beginning and it's used as a transition, then we need to figure out where the comma is going to go. So this time, there's no hint for you. So number 1 says, before I could think more on it, he changed the topic. So I see one phrase in there. So go highlight it, on it. And I'm going to look in there to see if there's a word that's a conjunction. So looking up at my list, I had before. Here it is. I'm going to put a box around it. Now I've got to think about where this clause ends. So when we take this clause out, there should be a complete sentence left. So if I just stopped here, let's say I thought it's before I could think. What I'm left with is more on it, he changed the topic, and that really doesn't make sense. So the rest of this clause has a few more words in it. Before I could think more on it, he changed the topic. I've got a subject and a verb in my dependent clause, and then I'm left with an independent clause. He changed. And so together, those make a complex sentence. Now we notice that our dependent clause is at the beginning, so this is one of those that we're going to have to add a comma here. Where that clause ends, we need a comma. Okay. All right, for the next one, I'm going to tell you there's one phrase, one clause, so go ahead and pause the screencast and try it, and then come back when you're ready to check it. So I see a phrase, on that night, and I need to look for a word. It's on my list of subordinating conjunctions, and it does happen to be on this list that I had memorized. What? So I'm going to put a box around what, and think, well, what had happened on that night is my dependent clause. Now this is something we haven't encountered yet. So in this case, I see my verb here, had happened. I don't see a subject. What actually acts like our subject. So this is the dependent clause. It's what had happened, and then I and told make up that independent clause. And together, they equal a complex sentence. And since my dependent clause is at the end of the sentence, I don't need a comma. My sentence starts with a subject and a verb. That is not a transition. All right, the next one I'm going to tell you has 2 subordinating conjunctions and 1 phrase. So here's my phrase, for a small infraction. And both of these were those common ones that I told you I had memorized. So one of them is when. When what? When I was done. It's got a subject and a verb. Looking for another one. Let's see, he is not a conjunction. Shocked. That is my subordinating conjunction. That I was proclaimed a wolf's head for a small infraction. That whole thing acts like my dependent clause. Got a subject and a verb. So this is a dependent clause. This is a dependent clause. And I've got a dependent clause at the beginning of the sentence, so I need to add a comma. That leaves this part, he seemed shocked, to be my independent clause. He is the subject and seemed is the verb. After a moment, I told him that they had killed Father Quinnell. Now this is going to be a little tricky because I see after here, and after can be a preposition or a conjunction. If I look at how it's used here, after a moment, there's no verb in there. So this is a good example of when we would see it used as a preposition. So where's the subordinating conjunction in there? That. If that is the subordinating conjunction, then the clause is that they had killed Father Quinnell. And within that clause, they is the subject, and had killed is my verb. So there's my dependent clause. And then I told him, because remember, we get rid of phrases, they don't exist anymore. I told him would be my independent clause. I am the subject, and told is the verb. Notice that my prepositional phrase was used as a transition, and it had a comma there, because it was at the beginning of the sentence. All right. Bear sat upright when he heard this, shocked that a priest was killed. There are no phrases, but there are two clauses, or dependent clauses. So I want you to pause it and see if you can go find them. The first one is when. When what? When he heard this. He is the subject and heard is the verb, so I know that's a dependent clause. Now, this comma here has a descriptive phrase, shocked that a priest was killed. So this is a different use of a comma. We haven't really talked about it. It's an elaborative phrase that's giving more information. And within that, we've got a dependent clause because I see that with a subject, priest, and the priest was killed. So you're going to go on your own, practice 6, 7, 8, and 9. And if you want help, you can raise your hand and ask me to help come check them with me if you want to. But I'm going to do number 10 with you because it's got a little bit of a different type of sentence that we haven't talked about yet. And we'll get into these a little bit later, but good for you to see now. When I was done, I told Bear I was sorry. So within here, there are no phrases, but there are two clauses. The problem is I don't see two subordinating conjunctions. I see when what, when I was done, it's got a subject and it's got a verb, so that's a dependent clause. I told Bear I was sorry. If I look over here, I see a subject, I, and a verb told, but then I see another subject and another verb, I was. So there's this thing, this rule, sometimes you can omit the word that. It's kind of like the understood you. You don't have to say you in a command. It's kind of like that. We don't have to put the that in there. It makes it a little wordy. We can if we want to, but we don't have to. So when I see an extra subject and a verb, that probably means that that is a subordinating conjunction. I'm sorry, that means it's a dependent clause because I is the subject and was is the verb. So we have two dependent clauses here, but we only see one subordinating conjunction. All right, so you're going to go through and do the rest of these. This tells you there are two phrases, two clauses in each of these. This one has 0 phrases, 2 clauses. This one has 0 phrases and 1 clause. Then you're going to go on to the back or the second page of this. See if you can't find 10 other subordinating conjunctions. And this time, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to practice rewriting them. So it says, before I could think more on it, he changed the topic. Get rid of my phrases on it. look for my subordinating conjunction before, has a subject and a verb, could think, and there's my dependent clause. Before I could think more on it, comma, because it's at the beginning, he changed the topic. Now it says rewrite the sentence above by moving the dependent clause to the end. So since it's at the beginning, we're going to switch the order. We're going to start here with he changed the topic before I could think more on it. And since it's moved to the end, I don't need a comma. Here's my subordinating conjunction. Now it's not at the beginning, so no comma. So you've got 1, 2, 3 more on this page that you're going to practice and you're going to rewrite. When you are done with this tab, you're going to go back to our chart and you're going to complete the exit ticket here. And this one is a quizzes, and I'm taking it for a grade to check your understanding.